And away we go. It's just me at the moment. Not sure if Frisk is going to join, not sure if Eric's going to join, and I'm not sure if third person's going to join. But however this goes, the show shall go on. And actually, before I start, now I'm not saying this is a me problem. However, even if it was a me problem, I think it's important for people to know. Well, not just what goes on in the world, but just in life in general. No matter what happens, there are things that are far beyond your control. And even if there are things you can control, no matter how hard you try to perfect things, there will be problems that's going to pop out every now and then. What's important is we stay resilient, we keep pushing forward, and make the best of whatever circumstances comes our way. Because no matter how bad things get, it will only get better. Just a little advice for anyone, for anything in life that comes their way. Whatever happens in life, even if it's not regarding whatever events is going on in the world, even if things go bad, and things will go wrong horribly, it won't get worse than it is right now. It will get better. What you have to do now is keep your head held high, keep moving forward, and focus on the present. And of course, focus on the things you can control. Because we're not perfect, we're all going to make mistakes. We should not just embrace the mistakes, but if we make mistakes, it should be some kind of constructive learning lesson coming from that. That will help us to progress forward and do better in whatever we're doing, whether it be contributing to our community, the job you're working in, or just something you do as a hobby, whatever your hobby that might be. That's just something I've learned just before starting this recording, this episode. And I think it'll be just as important for other people as it is important to me. And I feel proud of myself for actually having the courage to take that in, no matter how horribly things go in my life or whatever goes on in this world. Even if it's not the world that's falling apart. It's okay to make mistakes. But of course, you can't just make mistakes and do nothing about it. You gotta take something from that and develop for whatever it is you're working on in the future. You don't just make mistakes, you learn from them. And people, in hopes that you yourself will progress better in life, knowing that learning from that mistake, and also a lesson for other people that whatever happens, it's going to happen. But the question is, how will you take it? Will you keep moving forward despite of that mistake? That is very important. So, with that being said, let's jump right into the news. Let's see what goes on in this world today. There's a lot going on. It surely is. Trump's government efficiency department disbands 8 months before mandate ends. On November 3rd, Office of Personnel Management Director Scott Kapoor confirmed DOGE does not have centralized leadership, signaling its official disbandment after about a 10-month run despite Trump's original plans. Created on President Donald Trump's first day in January, DOGE aimed to reduce spending and eliminate waste, bloat, and insularity, with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy initially tapped to lead. Within DOGE's first 100 days, it pushed buyouts accepted by more than 75,000 workers, and as of November 20 claims, it reached $214 billion in savings. Republican allies reacted with condolences, while critics blamed dark money NGOs and political forces for Elon Musk's departure earlier this summer, weakening DOGE's leadership and momentum. Despite DOGE claiming the program was to end July 4, 2026, Scott Kapoor said there is no formal target for reductions and the hiring freeze is no longer in effect. Now, when I first heard about the story that Doge is no longer in existence, it shut down, I asked myself, well, what was even the point in creating Doge in the first place? Wasn't this something that was going to happen? Wasn't this going to be a department that's going to exist in the long term? Not just with the current administration, but the next administration. That's just me. That's my thoughts on it. But knowing that there is an end date claimed by Doge themselves, July 4th, 2026, I can see now that Doge is more of an department that's been created to cut down on existing excess government spending. And once all of those excess spending from the government is cut down, what's the point having Doge? What's the point having Doge around to cut down whatever expenses that outstands there may be left? So I don't have strong opinions on Doge, but when I first heard about it, like cutting down on excess spending, I was kind of all for that. Whilst it's important that the government provides whatever services it can to the people in the United States, or whatever government service in any country's government around the world, just because a country has lots of money does not mean it should go spend it all at once. Whatever that money has to be spent wisely. And I'm not saying like spend little amount of this and a little amount of that to save on costs. You need to think about what kind of expenses are there that governments need to consider before actually putting into effect a spending or budget plan for that particular government sector. Because, of course, every department has its costs and expenses. And I absolutely understand that these costs have to be taken seriously. But, of course, even with these expenses and costs that needs to be covered for each government department, and whilst providing a little extra money to that said department will make some kind of effect for the department in providing its service to the people of whatever country they live in, it comes back to how wisely and how efficient that money's been spent in those government departments. I don't have anything against providing money or providing services at a federal level by the government to its people, but if you're going to provide a budget for whatever departments that a country has, of course, money has to be spent wisely, and whatever money goes into something in that department, it's put to good use, and there is a lot of benefit provided to the people that outweighs the cost that was put into providing said services in the first place. That's my thoughts on it. Now, when I heard that July 4th, 2026 is when the DOGE program ends, I didn't know that until quite right now, as of in this recording. I had no idea this had a deadline, so the more you know, the more you know. French President Macron says Trump's Ukraine peace plan needs improvement. On Tuesday, November 25th, 2025, French President Emmanuel Macron said the US peace plan goes in the right direction but has elements that must be discussed and improved in an interview broadcast that day. The leaked 28-point plan shows it closely mirrors Kremlin demands, forcing Ukraine to cede territory and limit its military, observers noted last week. Macron argued that no one can decide territorial concessions for Ukrainians, that Ukraine's army must rebuild without limits, and that only Europe controls frozen Russian assets in Europe. Macron warned that a peace seen as a capitulation would put Ukraine in an impossible position and tempt Moscow to test Europe's resolve, risking further Russian advances, with negotiations expected today in Abu Dhabi. and a meeting between President Volodymyr Zelensky and President Donald Trump later this week. Macron said he has no current plan to travel to Washington and stressed broader European consultation is needed. Now, I don't want to give anyone involved too much credit as it stands now. However, I am glad there is progress. Again, it's not much and it's not enough, but I am glad there is something being done. I mean, given the lives that have been lost between both Ukraine and Russia, you know what? I'll take anything at this point. And personally, I don't want to give any other side any benefit of the doubt whatsoever. Whatever solutions it takes, if it means that there is a closer path to achieving some form of nationwide peace, and everyone can live their lives however they want to live their lives without having to fear for their lives from military action, I'm all for it. I'm glad there is progress. But even when there is progress and having whatever solutions to ensure that both sides get what they want, it's not enough. And I know for sure that whichever side people take, whether it be Ukraine or Russia, even they will argue it's not enough. However, I'd say I'll take anything. I'm not going to just whimly take any suggestions from one side that benefits that side particularly. However, I'm glad that there is something being done. There is a solution. It's not concrete, it's not guaranteed as of yet, but it is a start. It's better to have something than nothing at all. I'll put it like that. It's something. More people are addicted to marijuana, but fewer of them are seeking help, experts say. Marijuana use among young adults reached historic levels in recent years, with nearly 18 million Americans reporting daily or near daily use in 2022, up from less than 1 million 3 decades earlier. As marijuana becomes more normalized and potent, cannabis use disorder, where people crave marijuana and experience problems due to its use, is estimated to affect about 3 in 10 pot users. Despite the common misconception that marijuana addiction is not possible, fewer addicted individuals are seeking treatment, which experts attribute to the drug's widespread acceptance and associated stigma. I don't do marijuana often, or ever, depending how you look at it. Now, for sure, I have nothing to say regarding this story. I will say, however, if you are going to take substances that gives you some kind of satisfaction, be aware of the effects that these kind of drugs gives you. I'm not gonna argue, I'm not gonna tell people don't do this and don't do that. However, I will strongly advise and warn people that if you do take such substances, too much of it can be concerning and maybe life-threatening too. But again, it depends how much of that substance you are taking. Too much of it, then the average daily use should worry a lot of people. But nonetheless, to see a rise in marijuana is not a surprise, especially since that particular countries and many US states have legalized the use of marijuana over the years, and that's what's attributing to the rise in marijuana use. Yeah, there could be other factors. However, particular countries and subdivisions of said country legalizing the use of marijuana is what's somewhat contributing to the rise of marijuana use. Consumer confidence hits lowest point since April as job worries grow. The Conference Board said in its regular last Tuesday release that the Consumer Confidence Index fell to 88.7, a 6.8 point drop to its lowest since April, using preliminary data with a November 18th cutoff. The survey found consumers increasingly cited growing worries about jobs and household finances, with ratings dominated by prices and inflation. tariffs and trade, and mentions of the federal government shutdown. The sub-indexes revealed broad weakness, with the expectations index falling 8.63.2, the present situation index slipping 4.3 points to 126.9, and all 5 components of the overall index flagging weakness. Consumers trimmed intentions to buy big-ticket purchases and services spending over the next 6 months, while assessments of family finances worsened and more said that the economy was already in recession. Among demographic groups, only consumers earning less than $15,000 saw improved confidence in November, though median 12-month inflation expectations rose to 4.8%, and the share expecting interest rates to rise fell to about 50%. Bugger. Consumer confidence is not looking very good at the moment, I see. And of course, as of this recording, there is a particular event that happens once every year which many years ago, people will go crazy to go to the stores and buy products that they don't actually need, but the reason why they're buying it is because how low the prices are. To buy that at a particular time frame at that time of the year. But of course, as the years go by, and especially up to now, seeing how particular stores are price marking particular products to make it look like that the prices have dropped from what it was previously. If you go back a few months, it was already the same price to begin with, way before a particular event that many people call Black Friday. And of course, with the rise of online shopping, if anyone wants to buy anything on Black Friday, they can just do it online anyway, because the internet, it is one of our greatest conveniences, but is also likely our biggest downfall. I'll just say that like that. So yeah, all I can think of this story is the reason why consumer confidence is dropping. Black Friday is a massive event for shoppers all over the world. And of course, a couple of years ago, people would go to the stores and buy products as quickly as they can. People would go ravage. They go rabid. They go absolutely wild to just get any products that, again, they don't need, but they're buying it because it's at a price that is so low, you can't say no. And having buy that product on Black Friday, well, they save themselves tons of money if they were to buy it any other time of the year. However, I would argue actually that if people really want to get products at very low prices, I would suggest buying stuff on Cyber Monday. It may not be mainstream, however, it's just as impactful in terms of prices, just minus the hectic chaos as you've seen many years ago. Well, if people were old enough, that's as if people are old enough to remember that. So yeah, whilst even when consumer confidence is not looking good for the US or whatever country around the world, don't think it's end of the world. It could be worse actually. And again, this is the lowest since April this year, 2025. What is the lowest that consumer confidence ever been at? Ever in recorded history? That's the worst that could happen. Because you never know how bad things will get unless you actually experience it. And if even things do get bad, which will likely will, is it as bad as last time? Or the time before that? Or maybe the time before that? And so on and so forth. You just don't know until you actually experience it for yourself. I'm enjoying this way too much than I should have. Alibaba shares rise as AI drives 34% cloud sales jump. Alibaba reported a 34% year-on-year rise in cloud computing revenue to 39.8 billion Chinese yuan, exceeding expectations. Alibaba's AI-powered Qin app surpassed 10 million downloads within the first week of its public launch. The company has deployed about 120 billion yuan in capital expenditure towards AI and cloud infrastructure over the past 12 months. Well, that's China for you. No matter how many state-run companies that China has, there's somehow, and I'm not digging at China for this, there's going to be some aspects of free market capitalism somewhere, because how else would they get the money to provide funding for these companies like Alibaba and WeChat? There was a Chinese search engine which I don't know the name of. I think has starts with BAI, but yeah, that it's been a while I've heard of that. But yeah, I mean, let's see how it goes for Alibaba. It may sound like a lot of money, but you gotta ask yourself, where does the money come from? And will it be enough? It's just food for thought, because you never know. And even, of course, I know that not a lot of people have favorable opinions with China. Nonetheless, they're still doing something, and doing something they are. And they will continue to do something. That's it. That's all I have to say that's all I say for that. Syrian security forces used gunfire on Tuesday to break up two rival groups of demonstrators in the coastal town of Latakia, heartland of the country's Alawite minority, witnesses and officials said. Syria has been rocked by several episodes of sectarian violence since longtime leader Bashar al-Assad, who hails from the Muslim Alawite minority, was ousted by a rebel offensive last year and replaced by a Sunni-led government. Witnesses said hundreds of Alawite protesters had gathered to demand a decentralized political system in Syria and the rise of men they say were unjustly detained by the country's new authorities. Supporters of the government then gathered and began shouting insults at the Alawites. About an hour into the Alawites rally, gunshots were heard in Agriculture Square, one of the two town squares where the protesters had gathered. According to two witnesses and videos verified by Reuters, one of the verified videos showed a man lying motionless on the ground with a wound to the head. There was no immediate official word on casualties. Nureddin al-Brimo, the head of media relations in Latakia province, told Reuters security forces had fired into the air to disperse the rival protesters, and added that unknown assailants had also fired on civilians and onto the security forces. He gathered no further details, but witnesses said both protests had broken up by the afternoon. There's no more security. The rally had been called for by the head of the Supreme Alawite Islamic Council, Ghazal, on Monday. He urged Alawites to protest peacefully. We demand to live in security, to go to school safely without kidnapping. This was the only place we used to feel security. Now there's no more security, and we're exposed to kidnapping and fear, said Lean, who attended the protest but declined to give her last name out of security concerns. You know what? I don't blame them. I don't blame them whatsoever. Especially if there's a guy laying motionless with a wound to his head. That is that that's not the only issue. That there is someone potentially unalived, more likely than not. When I first heard the story about a change in government in Syria, I've heard that a lot of Syrians, both in the country of Syria and other Syrian people, or people of Syrian ethnicity, wherever they are around the world, they were cheering and celebrating that Bashar al-Assad is no longer the leader of Syria, and whatever grips of power he had in the country of Syria is no more, and now he's seeking refuge in Russia, last time I remember. And then when the change of government happened, again, I'm not saying that change of government is a bad thing, but yeah, you do have to ask yourself, could this be any worse than what we've been through last time? And if it is, I'm not saying we should go back to the previous government, but if people for many years have been let down and not got what they want, I would expect, and I have trust, that there will be people in whatever country they're in, they would protest against a particular series of events, whether it be the style of government, the decisions the government has made, and whatever legislation they plan on passing that doesn't go in favor of the people in said country. Even when problems do stir about with new governments taking power, not to say that it's better than what they had last time, you also have to ask yourself, whilst Syria, under its new government, it's now opening up to other trade relations with other countries, and whatever sanctions that Syria had under the previous government now being lifted. Surely, for sure, the Syrian economy is going to do well again. Of course, there's going to be services that still should be produced in-house within the country, but still allowing options for Syrians to get stuff from outside of the country. It's great that such options like that exist for Syrians, and they can use those connections and services and goods to bolster up and help support whatever business that the Syrians are working on. Which I will say is a positive, because under the previous governments, they had to pretty much work with what's in the country, since there were so many sanctions from a lot of bigger high economy nations. But under the new government, trade relations with Syria and other countries now starting to open up under its new leadership, and now there's access to goods and services from other countries that Syrians would never have gotten before under the previous government, but now they can, because countries are now willing to be open up to Syria. Although not every country is open to Syria. I know there's going to be cultural clashes for sure. However, this actually goes back to the advice I gave at the start of this episode. No matter how bad things get, whether it be in our day-to-day lives or whatever event goes on in the world, things will get better. Indeed they will. But all I will say is, hopefully, the people in Syria, they take advantage of these new opportunities and they provide better lives for themselves with these connections. Even if people, wherever they are around the world, have opinions that aren't so favorable to the new Syrian government. I understand there's going to be people that will say something like that the new Syrian government has strings attached to Israel. I'm not saying it's true, but I've heard people saying that is the case. Make of that as you will. However, honestly, I'll take it. What I hope doesn't happen is that whatever minorities, whether it be religious or ethnicity-wise, in Syria, they don't have to suffer any discrimination or any violence whatsoever. Because whatever our difference might be, no one deserves to be treated horribly and be beaten up because of their identity. Something that we cannot change. It's something that is something we are born with. And that's something I hope for this new Syrian government. That whatever your difference might be, we can all live our lives in peace. As we should. Palestinian economy suffers worst ever collapse after Israel-Hamas conflict, UN says. On November 20, UNCTAD warned the Palestinian economy collapsed due to war and restrictions, estimating Gaza Strip rebuilding will cost more than $70 billion and take several decades. UNCTAD found that 2 years of war and economic restrictions triggered an unprecedented collapse across the Palestinian economy, tying the crisis to the October 7, 2023 attack, and Israel's intensified blockade and bombing campaign. According to UNCTAD figures, Gaza's GDP contracted by 87% over 2023-2024, leaving GDP per capita at $161 and about 174,500 structures damaged. The report says Gaza will rely on extensive international support, with recovery taking decades and the crisis ranking among the 10 worst globally since 1960. UNCTAD urged a comprehensive recovery plan, including coordinated international assistance, restoration of fiscal transfers, and easing constraints, noting the West Bank faces its worst downturn, worsened by $4 billion withheld tax revenues. Just because not many people are talking about Palestine, as they did since October 7th happened, and then the year or two after that, doesn't mean that there aren't any problems going on in Palestine. And I say the same with what's going on in Ukraine, even with a plan going on. There is still a war between Ukraine and Russia still going on. What happened in Nigeria with persecution of Christians? Ethiopia. I'm not sure what issues are going on in Ethiopia, but I have seen a couple of comments on social media that there is issues going on in Ethiopia. Myanmar, with their change of leadership. Again, don't know too much about Myanmar, but I know that when there's a change of leadership, there's going to be a difference on how people in Myanmar live their lives. And actually, when I was scrolling on those social media, I've heard that there's been issues going on in Tanzania. Let's see if I can find what's going on in Tanzania. Here we go. Tanzania cancels Independence Day celebrations after election unrest. Tanzania has cancelled next month's Independence Day celebrations, with the funds to be instead spent on rebuilding infrastructure damaged in recent election unrest. Prime Minister, I'm gonna butcher this so badly, Mwigulu Nchemba has said. His announcement comes as the opposition and others have been calling for people to gather on Independence Day, 9th of December, to demonstrate about killings that took place following last month's disputed poll. The opposition believes hundreds of people died in the crackdown. The government has yet to give a death toll and has set up a commission of inquiry. President Samia Suluhu Hassan won the poll with 98% of the vote, described by the opposition as a mockery of democracy. Her key opponents were unable to contest the poll. Tundu Lissu has been in detention on treason charges, which he denies, while Luhaga Mpina's candidacy was rejected on technical grounds. Election observers have since reported signs that the vote was manipulated and fell short of democratic standards. An international coalition of lawyers and human rights groups has now formally asked the International Criminal Court to investigate President Samia and her government for crimes against humanity allegedly committed during the unrest, including mass killings and the secret disposal of more than 500 bodies. The 82-page document was formally submitted to the ICC's office of the prosecutor on November 13th, but was only being made public on Tuesday. The government had imposed an internet blackout for 5 days from the 29th of October, election day, and threatened anyone sharing photos from the protest. Now, as of this recording, I am not sure if the same people that's been spreading awareness about what's going on in Ukraine back in 2022, and of course raising awareness about what's going on in Gaza around 2023 and 2024, are also going to spread awareness about what's going on in Tanzania, as they are about spreading awareness about what's going on in Sudan, and to some extent Palestine and Ukraine on top of that also. And of course, Yemen. Again, I don't know too much about Yemen, but I know that the Houthis are a very hot topic there. There's so much going on in this world. And whilst people try their hardest to raise awareness about all of these issues at the same time, there's so much that goes on. Thankfully, with the rise of new technological advancements and access to information increasingly on the rise, that's helped people a lot in being made aware of what goes on in the world. Yet it is not enough. It's certainly not enough. I'm now thinking, actually going off topic, which again, these issues are still important to be made aware of, but not unless we're actually in the sidelines, mainly actually unless we're actually in the action of these events. No matter how hard people try to say what's going on is awful, these people have been unaligned by these forces. We'll never fully understand these issues unless we're there ourselves and we witness with our own eyes people being killed, not just for speaking out what goes on in their nations or communities, but just living their life as someone of this identity practicing their religious beliefs. It's awful. And I can't stress that enough. It's absolutely awful. No one should go through that. And whilst I absolutely understand if people are sick and tired of hearing these stories, I'm certainly sick and tired myself hearing about this. However, unless these issues are resolved, they're not going away. Things like this are still going to happen. I hope that I want to cover more stories. It's madness. I can't wrap my head around how all of these tragedies are all happening all at once. I'm still going to continue raising awareness of these stories. However, the amount of coverage on these stories, from my perspective, is just too much. And I think if more people are in a similar position as I am, reporting these stories, I think they would at least find some initiatives to find stories that are somewhat positive. That's not to say that that is not to say we should turn our heads away from horrible tragedies that's going on and people being unalive for reasons beyond our own comprehension or our in real life understanding because we're not there to even witness it ourselves. It's so much to wrap our heads around. And for anyone living in countries where such horrible stuff is going on and people are losing their lives because of, again, reasons that may apply specifically to people living in a country, I hope a solution and an effective solution comes about. We can continue living our lives in peace. No more lives are lost. We can live our lives in peace. We don't have to worry about losing our lives to people possessing firearms or anyone with ill intent. There's so much. I hope people stay safe. I can't stress that enough. Chancellor Rachel Reeves is grappling with weak economic growth, persistent inflation, and an expected downgrade to official productivity forecasts. Chancellor Rachel Reeves has pledged to grip the cost of living in a budget next week. In an example of one move aiming to ease the pressure of people's finances, rail fares are to be frozen for the first time in 30 years, saving commuters on more expensive routes more than £300 a year. But at the same time, Ms. Reeves is widely expected to raise taxes on November 26th in an effort to bridge the multi-billion-pound gap in her spending plans. Writing in the Mirror, the Chancellor acknowledged that high prices hit ordinary families most, and that the economy feels stuck for too many. That's why in my budget on Wednesday, I will take action to grip the cost of living, she said. Ms. Reeves is grappling with weak economic growth, persistent inflation, and an expected downgrade to official productivity forecasts as she prepares her statement. Delivering on our promise to make people better off is not possible if we don't get a grip on inflation, she wrote in the Sunday Times. It is a fundamental precursor to economic growth. It is essential to make families better off and for businesses to thrive. There is an argument, there is an urgent need to ease the pressure households now. It will require direct action by this government to get inflation under control. She said reforms would change the welfare system from trapping millions of people on benefits to one designed to help people succeed. Keir Starmer declined to preempt the Chancellor when asked by reporters at the G20 in South Africa whether he could guarantee future Labour budgets would not contain tax hikes. Well, that's all it is with the current government in the UK. They say they will reduce taxes, but yet we're hearing that taxes are going up. Whilst the government has to get their money from somewhere, taking more money out of everyday people mostly is it's not just it's worse it's for the current government in the UK. It's also going to somewhat strain their finances as well, because if people pay more in taxes, with whatever money they have left, it'd be less than what money they had previously remaining after previous tax rates before, not just with the new tax hikes with the current Labour government, but the tax hikes before the current Labour government. Now, not to say that it's going to fix all of the country's problems, but I have an idea about trying to get money from elsewhere, outside of the people, out of taxing the Brits. I think Norway's. I think this is similar. This is something what Norway's doing right now, especially with the money, with the money they made from the oil. Don't know full details about what Norway has done with the wealth fund, but I think if the UK has some kind of wealth fund like Norway has, again, it's not going to fix all the problems in the UK, but at least there is something, but at least there is some kind of finances that will help cover most of the costs that the UK currently has right now. It's at least a start in the right direction, in my opinion. Yeah, let's just see how that goes. There's so much more that needs to be said and done in the next few years. Greta Thunberg banned from Venice after dyeing Grand Canal green in COP30 protests. On Sunday, climate activist Greta Thunberg joined Extinction Rebellion in dyeing the Grand Canal Venice emerald green to mark the conclusion of the COP30 United Nations Climate Conference in Brazil. In retaliation for Italy's opposition for fossil fuel limits, activists said they used an environmentally harmless dye to highlight the massive effect on climate collapse. Across Italy, Extinction Rebellion synchronized dyeing fountains and rivers in Genoa, Padova, Turin, Bologna, and Taranto with a Rialto Bridge banner reading "Stop Ecocide" and a red robe flash mob. Authorities imposed fines and short-term bans after the protest organizers received a 48 ban and $170 fine, with 35 fellow activists facing the same punishment, while Veneto Province Governor Luca Zaia condemned it as a disrespectful act. COP30 leaders agreed to a deal that did not mention fossil fuels, while increasing funding for poorer countries to adapt. And Andre Carrera do Lago, COP30 president, confirmed the absent fossil fuel roadmap would be a separate, non-binding proposal backed by more than 80 countries. Now, I don't have anything against people protesting for particular causes, or against particular acts and legislature or plans to change the world. Oh, if you're going to protest, especially with climate change, I'm not sure if dyeing the river or canals green is going to do any good. And look, it doesn't matter if the dye is eco-friendly. It's going to be quite the cleanup for people that work with water management or whatever people call the groups of workers that cleans the canals in Venice. Yeah, once the dye is being put into the rivers and canals in Venice, someone's going to clean that up, and they're possibly getting paid to do the cleanup as well. But of course, I've already said enough about COP30, such as particular motives they give, even with the roadmap they say they give out, and how to combat climate change, global warming. I'm not denying it. I'm just skeptical, especially skeptical about how these experts have no idea what they're talking about. And that's not to say don't listen to them. You just have to question how this will work. How is that going to work? And how is it going to protect and conserve the climate, the environments that these people that we're living in right now? Because not many people bring this up. The native indigenous people in Brazil, they came into COP30, stormed the building, and protest against particular ideas that these experts have said they will do as part of their roadmap for COP30. And look, my opinions on climate change and preserving and protecting our environment are vastly different things. If you want to plant trees, pick up litter from rivers, create habitats for animals, go ahead. I'd support that. If you're going to talk about how in the next few years all the ice caps will melt, but only, I don't know, 1 cubic ton of ice melted, when people said 20 or 30 was going to be melting in the next 10 years. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not fully bought into that. But that's not to say that these changes aren't happening. It's just when people make predictions about what happens to our planet and the changes that will happen for the worst for our planet, they go above and beyond. They're overselling these predictions, say these are beyond catastrophic scales in attempts to fear people into making changes into their daily lives, which not that it's needed, but it's just not logistically possible. You can't expect people to just drastically change their lives all in one go just because we're hearing that ice caps are going to melt in the next 10 years. And if people are concerned, what are they going to do to prevent the ice caps from melting? What are they going to do to prevent greenhouse gases from being emitted into the air? I'm hearing a lot of gotta do this, gotta do that, but not a lot of action to actually addressing the root cause and the root problems that these people say is an issue in our lives. Whatever the solution, it's not going to make much of a difference in terms of how people view climate change and COP as a whole, as there is a rise in anti-climate change skepticism and anti-climate change narratives. If people are serious and they want people to get on board with climate change, they need to step up their game. Because if they don't, then oh boy, I think they're cooked. I think they're done for. They are so cooked. So yeah, that's the episode, folks.